Saul Kaye of Isreal Cannabis joins us and discusses the state of cannabis in the state of Israel. Welcome to Cannabis Economy. I'm your host, Seth Adler. Check us out on Twitter at CanEconomy. That's two N's and the word economy. Saul is a licensed pharmacist born in South Africa, raised in Australia, and working in Israel on moving the cannabis industry forward in the Middle East and eventually globally. He talks about how he expects the industry to move online the same way that the pharmacy business did beginning about 10 years ago. Happy to be on Cannabis Radio Network and the Sexpot Comedy Co-op. Saul Kaye, Isreal Cannabis. Enjoy. All right, so somehow Saul Kaye from Israel is talking to me right now. Saul, is that right?
That's right. Thank you, Seth, for having me on.
Where are you in Israel as we speak?
Now, we're in our offices here in Beit Shemesh, a little city halfway between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv.
Excellent. And Tel Aviv is tech hotbed these days, right?
Tel Aviv is startup nation. If you've ever heard of what's going on in the high-tech scene, in the biomed and pharma scene in Israel, yes, Tel Aviv is definitely the equivalent of Silicon Valley for tech in Israel.
All right, let's set the stage here. Isreal Cannabis, first things first, what is that?
So that's our company, Isreal Cannabis. We started looking at the cannabis space a couple of years ago, myself and my partner, Jason. And we formed the company Isreal Cannabis because of the reputation that Israel has gained in research and development in cannabis, both on the medicine and the agro side. And we saw that very early on, but we also saw that there's a lack of global communication and a platform which enables collaboration between entities in different countries and looking at pipelines of products that are going to be developed in one place and imported, exported into another place. And we decided to set that platform up, and that's what we've been working on for the last couple of years.
Okay, and what is the end goal? If that is what brought you in, you know, what are you trying to accomplish there?
So we have a conference coming up in Israel to showcase the revolutionary, groundbreaking regulatory environment which has allowed research to happen in Israel where it's basically not happened anywhere else in the world. There are hundreds of studies done on humans in Israel. Cannabis is used in a nursing home setting together with cannabis nurses. It looks like the regulatory environment is about to change again for the good, and I'm glad to be part of that. I work together with a minister of the Knesset, a parliamentary member, Sharon Haskell, and we've been integral in shaping the reform for cannabis regulation in Israel, and we are very confident that next week when it goes up to the Knesset that we're going to make some significant changes.
Okay, and we're going to get into the event specifically. I know that you've got some of our friends there, but you visited Knesset. You spoke at Knesset.
That's right.
Take us through how that invitation occurred and what went down. And I guess for those not very familiar with Israel, maybe mention what Knesset is.
Right. So the Knesset is our parliament in Israel, a relatively broken system that goes into elections very, very often, but there is a very, very strong lobby in Israel from the patients, and there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of bureaucracy in getting your license. There have been cases where people's licenses have been taken away. A license in Israel is a license to use a illegal substance, as opposed to, I guess it's similar to California, where it's also a license to use an illegal substance. But there's been a lot of arbitrary decisions made with a lack of transparency. So there's a lot of pain on the patient side. How come a patient who put in a request to increase a dose from 100 grams a month suddenly gets his license cut to 50 grams a month? And what's that patient meant to do? So we got involved on that level, since I work together with parents of epilepsy kids in Israel, and I work with fibromyalgia groups in Israel. So we were invited along to that lobby to give our voice. And from there it scaled up into myself and Professor Hanush from the Hebrew University, Professor Meshulam's chemist. He came on our team to offer the perspective of a medicinal chemist who has many, many years of training and set the protocols up, and a geneticist. So the three of us came up against the ministry's, they call it the IMCA, the Israel Medical Cannabis Agency. They put up their reform. We discussed that reform, tried to get a few points changed, which would make it easier for patient access and a better understanding of what will be released to the market and what won't be released to the market. And we, that will go up to the parliament next week, to the Knesset, and it's looking like it'll be a very strong vote in favor of the reform.
Excellent. Take us through your background. You do have that pharma background.
That's right. So I'm a trained pharmacist. I studied at Sydney University in Australia. Made Aliyah, came to Israel almost 20 years ago, and started my first retail pharmacy. I grew that to a business with multiple stores here in Israel. And that's my background in pharma. On the retail side, we manufacture some prescription medications still in Australia and pipeline them all over the world. So I'm familiar with the manufacture space of pharmaceuticals and licensing, pipelining, distributing those products all around the world. And I see a lot of challenges that face the pharmacy world, which we went through 10, 15 years ago when international trade became internet trade, and we had to look and rewrite the rules. So it's happening again in cannabis, and luckily we were successful in that space and managed to zigzag our way around the roadblocks that are consistently put up. And I think that experience has uniquely placed me in the cannabis space as someone who has done it in a space that's never been done.
Yeah, let's unpack that, though. As far as pharma going from international to internet, take us through the steps. Take us through the timeline. When did you kind of first notice that there was going to be a change, and then when did you first activate that change with your business?
So I think I saw it probably 10 years ago. I had a pharmacy in Jerusalem, which was a late-night emergency pharmacy, and we used to service a lot of travelers who came into Israel and needed to pick up their prescription. They'd lost it, they left it at home, whatever it was. And they were always surprised by the price in Israel. And this is kind of the same time that patients, would cross borders, go down to Mexico or go up to Canada to buy their prescription medications. And pharmacies from there started contacting us to see if we wanted to dispense medications to their patients, obviously because of the preferential pricing. And that's kind of how it all developed up. And we had to work together with the regulator to figure out, number one, is this legal? What is the regulator going to say about it? What sort of protocols do we have to put in place? Because it's a slightly different method of dispensing. But essentially, with the removal of that layer of retail in pharmacy, how do you maintain ethical pharmacy practices with a patient who you never meet? So we actually established a whole bunch of protocols and built the protocol system for Israel in how to do that. And that's, kind of throwback again to how cannabis is changing. The regulations are always painful. You can take that for granted. And the thing with regulations is it's a good thing, but it is painful. So you have to try and ease the pain. You have to see where you can make the most change, but still work within whatever the regulator has decided.
Yeah, and what we do each time we talk to somebody in a new region is kind of make sure that we understand what the the regulatory landscape is on the ground. So take us through what it is on the ground there in Israel specifically. I know that you've got a global focus, but for the moment, let's just focus on what the regulatory landscape is in Israel.
Sure. So since 1967, Israel has been studying the plant and doing medical research with patients. Since 1996, they started the active current medical program, where initially people were growing inside of a collective, but now there are 8 licensed growers in Israel who currently operate under all the verticals. So they can manipulate the genetics, they can grow mothers, they can extract and finish formulations and dispense directly to the patients at home. What is changing in the regulation is it will be a non-vertically integrated system where each of those links in the chain will be separated on the company end and the facility end. But what is most revolutionary is that cannabis will be dispensed in the pharmacy chain. So we're not going to go and open dispensaries. It'll be dispensed as every medicine is currently dispensed inside the pharmacies, which is definitely revolutionary. Holland tried it. It failed, unfortunately. But I think the framework failed for different reasons. What we have now currently over 23,000 patients in Israel for a range of indications, a very broad basket. Not quite as good as, say, Massachusetts, but ALS, Parkinson's, and other neurological diseases, epilepsy, pain, chemotherapy, epilepsy for kids, Crohn's disease, and many, many more coming up. So Tourette's is another one. So a broad base, but it's not viewed as first-line therapy. Don't go to your doctor after one seizure and say, I have epilepsy, give me cannabis. He's going to put you on 3 different medications first. If they fail and you continue to have seizures, then maybe you can go and get cannabis. So it's not an easy situation. You have to fight for it. But there is a recognition. For example, my mother has Crohn's disease, and the licensing process was relatively easy because she fit all the categories. She has Crohn's disease. She took 2 biological medicines before that didn't work. Great, tick all the boxes, and cannabis is a solution.
Oh, that's so interesting that you've got to go through the pharmaceuticals before you can access the cannabis.
Correct. It's absurd. I mean, but doctors often feel this. I sit with doctors all the time. We speak about cannabis and the issues and the social impact. And the thing that they don't understand is I can't prescribe a medicine that I don't know the effect of. They are more than happy to prescribe a medicine that they know the effect of, even when they know that might cause death.
Right. Sure. Yeah. No, that's a side effect that we hear about, at least in our American pharmaceutical commercials. Yeah, sure, you might die, but at least you can get an erection. So as far as so it seems like retail is more in a legitimate place with cannabis than the actual science. In other words, I can access cannabis through a pharmacy, but I do have to go through a couple of pharmaceuticals first. Am I hearing you right?
So right now you can access cannabis easily, but that would be dispensed direct from the grower. In the next 6 months, it will be dispensed through the pharmacy. But yes, not first-line therapy. Definitely, you have to medically need it. It's not going to be a card given to anyone with a migraine.
And you mentioned the doctors say that they don't know the effects. What we do know here is that you do have some research, which is more than no research. What on the ground there, what research are you dealing with?
So there have been studies done here in Israel. GW Pharma did their epilepsy study here. The Crohn's disease study was done in Israel. There are currently over 30 medical studies being done in Israel, and I know of many more being planned. And again, that's the advantage. I don't think it's a retail advantage at all. It's the advantage on the research that has been allowed to be done. And the future, number one, it's cheaper to do Israel research, clinical studies in Israel. That's a model that's worked very well in biomed, and why we're very strong is because to do the same study in America, to get the same FDA license at the end of the day is 2 to 3 times more expensive. So there is an advantage to doing a medical study here in Israel. There's an advantage that the regulator will allow you to do the study and is open for you to do the study. And it's not unusual. We know of a company that's about to get a Helsinki protocol, which is a clinical study on humans in Europe, and this will be the first one issued in Europe, whereas this is a standard practice in Israel. Not only that, but you can access financing from the Office of the Chief Scientist. Israel, I think, is the number one country in the world that puts money into entrepreneurship. Last year it was $450 million that the Israeli government invests in startups. There's no pushback if it's a cannabis startup. It's just more innovation. That's fine, that's dandy.
We like innovation in Israel. Fantastic. As far as that research is concerned, I know that you have the good professor speaking at the event. We'll talk about that session in a moment and the event in total in a moment. But what about his research?
So Professor Meshulam has pioneered the research. He was the professor the chemist that isolated THC, followed on by CBD and all the other cannabinoids. He then later on went to discover the endocannabinoid system, the system of receptors that react to these cannabinoid molecules. I can't say a lot about his research now. I know that there is going to be something mentioned at Canatech. There should be a reveal, but I do not know details. But his work hasn't stopped. He's 86 years old, I believe, and is go. Anytime we've seen or met him, he's always in his laboratory. He's always on the go.
Yeah, he, basically the 10 Commandments to Moses is the endocannabinoid system to him.
Correct.
So, we want to get at least a little bit religious with you there in Israel. But you come from Australia. What the heck happened there? Where were you born?
I was born actually in South Africa. My parents moved to Australia when I was 6, like many South African immigrants. And grew up in Australia. I consider myself Australian. Aussie.
So Aussie, oi. So South Africa versus New Zealand versus Australia. You've got that big rugby tournament. That's the way that they were connected in my brain before I realized that you moved there moved to Australia from South Africa. What city were you based in?
So I grew up in Perth, a small city on the west coast, a lot more relaxed, than Sydney, the big Sydney we sort of would compare to New York, whereas I guess Perth would be like Santa Barbara.
Santa Barbara. I hoped you didn't say San Francisco because it's not that. It is Santa Barbara.
That would be Sydney. That would be Sydney.
Yeah, Sydney. That's exactly right. And so you've got all of the cities kind of on the, on that east coast, and really Perth is all by itself on the west, right?
That's right, all by itself. Beautiful. Beaches are wonderful in Australia anyway. But Perth is magnificent. Yeah. And
there's a specific kind of tree, I think, that Perth is famous for. Am I right about that, or am I?
I don't know.
Maybe it might simply be a hallucination, Saul. All right, so Perth to Israel. How did that trek happen?
So I grew up in a religious house, modern Orthodox family. And Israel was always, the place for a Jew to be. And I came here to yeshiva, to seminary, learned here for a year, met a lot of people, went back to Australia and studied pharmacy, met my wife, and we both wanted to live in Israel. So we were young and stupid and hopped on a plane and came to Israel, and we've been here ever since.
So, you've got, religion is important to you. What kind of, learnings from Judaism do you employ on a day-to-day basis? We would love to know, what's the guiding light there? It's a big and it's a deep question, but I'm still asking it.
I think my guiding light is there is a parasha, a portion in the Torah that speaks about Kiddushim Tiyu. You should be a holy nation. And for me, that means just always remembering that I am a Jew, acting for the good of people, not only for the good of myself, and being a fair and honest person. And I think that's one of the reasons this ecosystem in Israel that we're building around cannabis has been so responsive, is that we're just honest, good people that want to do good at the end of the day. We happen to know that we'll make money by doing good. That's okay. I'm a capitalist as well as a Jew. We have a balance, but the good is what drives us. And I've seen the power that cannabis can help. Jason, my partner, is a patient. My mother is a patient. My father should be a patient. I like to say that, the world suffers from this debilitating condition called PCSD. Have you heard of it?
No, I haven't.
No, PCSD is pre-cannabis stress disorder, and it's chronic. You've never heard of anything like it. It's almost as bad as the people who are fighting against dihydrogen oxide. It's a terrible, terrible chemical that everyone consumes.
These are all good points, Saul. These are all good points. So talking about doing good with others, let's zero in on this event that you guys are running. You've pulled in, some of our friends who've been on, Brendan Kennedy, Dr. Sue Sisley, and unfortunately schedules didn't line up for me to do some moderating there. We had an almost, but take us through it. I mean, you've got a few tracks. You've got research, you've got community, you've got entrepreneurship. Take us through the theme and what's going to be happening.
So my ultimate goal when I set it up was to showcase Israel. Why Israel? Why it happened here? So we give a little bit of the history of why it's been so favorable to do it. We showcase some of the research that's been done and why it's a good idea to do more research here. And then we switch into the investor versus the entrepreneur. So I wanted to make sure that we had a great mix of investors in the room, and we managed to get Privateer and Viridian and the ultra-fine Tress Capital, some big capital players in the cannabis markets to come out. And we got the young early entrepreneurs in Israel. We have a pitch event where they're going to be pitching for a prize, of services, mentorship, legal and accounting, in order to help propel them forward in their cannabis venture. So that was my ultimate goal, is to showcase. And so we started nailing down, the various people who's coming, and it built itself. It was an analogy we use is we were flying the plane while we were building it. And thank God, obviously, has a hand in it, but a lot of great pieces fell into place, and we're putting on probably one of the biggest events in terms of the names, the international recognition that we've managed to pull together. Fantastic.
Excellent. As far as the pitch event, are those entrepreneurs all from Israel?
No, not at all. We have an American company coming to pitch. And I believe we have an applicant from India. We have not decided our final pitches. We have over 30 pitches in the pipeline, and we will have an event to whittle it down to the best and brightest, and they'll be pitching, but it is not exclusively Israel.
Got it. What are the basic types of companies? I'm sure that there are many different kind of iterations of companies that are pitching, but what are some of the, give us some flavor as to what these companies do.
We've had pitches from lighting technology companies, optimizing grow houses and sensoring technologies. We have technologies to reduce energy consumption, increase yield, decrease pests and disease in the grow. There's a company that's developed a range of organic nutrients that strengthen the root system. There is a company, they're not pitching, unfortunately, but they've created a cloning robot which comes in, snips, moves and clones different cannabis strains. They're very, very early, but it's in development. We know of companies in development in Israel on new vaporizing technology that's going through an active clinical trial right now. So a large mix from technology. There's a company looking at the ad space, optimizing customer experience inside the dispensary environment, couponing, loyalty, similar to the plays, the things that you're seeing coming out of America, but a slick, nice new design. I think cannabis touches everything. You've got the ancillary services, you've actually got the grow, you've got the farmer, you've got marketing, legal. There are so many different people getting involved in this industry from all over the place. So innovations are not necessarily tied to grow tech or media or information. It really does touch everything.
Excellent. So, best of luck with that thing. It is really coming together. You and I have been talking since it was essentially just a thought in your mind. So congratulations on getting to this point. After the event, though, you've got those 6 months until you can kick the doors open on cannabis in pharmacies. Take us through what you'll be doing with the other parts of your company to get ready for that.
Right. So we have the pharmaceutical research arm, and that's continuing on. We'll have a license to do research on humans shortly, and we'll be announcing, which indication we're going after. But we have a formulation that's on the pharmaceutical side. We are setting up a MOP, a agricultural research institute, to be able to test products on cannabis. That'll be allowed once the new licensing goes through, so that's something we'll be working on. We're releasing a product at Cannatech. It's a product I designed and developed for dry mouth caused by cannabis use. That's a product that will be released at Cannatech, and then, sales begin, so a company has to start. We have 9...
Is that some sort of lozenge? What is that?
No, it's a spray. It's made of essential herbs and essential oils, natural herbs and essential oils. And we've developed it. It's the flavor profiles are now finished on our first 2 that we're going to release, which is a mint flavor and a sour lemon flavor. We did notice through our research when we were building the formulation that smokers, and particularly cannabis smokers, have killed their taste buds. And their desire for intense flavor is actually quite interesting, and much more than the stuff that's out on the market. So we developed the flavor profile using 20, 30 odd cannabis patients here in Israel, and that's going to be released at Cannatech, and we're going to give units to patients here in Israel to get feedback, and we'll adjust our flavors based on their feedback. But that's a company that's being built right now, and we're investigating the crowdfunding space for cannabis, because I believe with the trouble of getting institutional finance, whether banking or VC, for cannabis ventures, there's a unique opportunity for crowdfunding. So we're deep into investigating that side of the business as well.
Look at the big, beautiful brain on Saul. All right. You got plenty going on. You're obviously in the right place at the right time. I've got 3 final questions for you. I'll tell you what they are, and then I will ask you them one by one. What has most surprised you in cannabis? That's the first question. What has most surprised you in life? That's the second question. And then on the soundtrack of Saul Kaye's life, what is one song that must be on there? So what has most surprised you in cannabis?
I think actually how Jewish cannabis is. Early on, I hooked up with a group called Illuminate in Oregon, who pointed me in the direction of how the Jewish fight is very similar to the civil unrest that happened in the 60s, and the Jews were prominent there, and the Jews should be prominent again in the fight for cannabis. And they pointed me that, the number of, or the percentage of African Americans incarcerated against whites incarcerated for cannabis crimes is astounding. So I started to get involved there. But recently, other things happen. Every conference I go to, I do wear a kippah, I wear a yarmulke on my head, and people walk past me and they give me what I've come to call the Jew nod. And so they're looking at you and they're nodding and like, yeah, you're one of the tribe, right? And this is happening over and over again. And so I think that was the most surprising thing about the cannabis industry. It really is very, very Jewish.
Yeah, the Jew nod.
Must be another one of our conspiracies to take over the world.
Oh, sure, of course.
Bring it on.
Absolutely. What has most surprised you in life?
I'm different from when I was 20. I'm calm, I'm more relaxed, I'm less stressed, which is completely different to my father. So it's kind of nice. My 20s and 30s were very highly stressed, running businesses, building companies. And now I run businesses and build companies, but the stress is gone, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, no, that is great. And you mentioned your dad again. Is he particularly suffering from an acute, well, does he have PTSD himself?
No, I just think he's got grumpy man syndrome. He's had it for a while. And maybe, something could help with that, possibly. Maybe there's a herb out there that has some antidepressant properties. Amazing.
All right. Well, final question, Saul. On the soundtrack of your life, name one track, one song that's got to be on there.
Oh wow, that's such a hard question.
That's why we ask it.
Rocket Man.
Wow.
Yeah.
I was not expecting Elton John.
There
Okay.
I don't think I would have, Rocket Man. Clifton, our CMO, a friend of mine, I brought him into the company. He does all our marketing. He came from the world of marketing before. He did SodaStream's digital marketing campaign before he came on at ICANN. He likes to say that he's there just to hold me down because I'm up somewhere in the skies figuring out some connection or what can be optimized or how it can be done, and he's just on the ground holding me down, holding me back, keeping me on this earth.
I love it. All right, Saul Kaye, you've got, Canatech coming up right there in the beginning of March 2016. I'm sure we'll catch up after to see how it all went. And, of course, Isreal Cannabis proper, the company where you guys are doing great stuff. And we'll certainly want to talk to you as you get cannabis into pharmacies in about 6 months. Thanks so much for your time, Saul.
Thanks for having me, Seth.
And there you have Saul Kaye. Clearly a person doing what he is meant to be doing here on Earth. Looking forward to checking back with Saul to see how it's all going in a few months. Again, check us out on Twitter at CanEconomy. Happy to be on the Cannabis Radio Network and the Sexpot Comedy Co-op.